What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another reaction video. We got NBA players who destroyed their careers in seconds. Let's check this out.
It takes many years to build a good reputation and 1 second to destroy it.
Facts.
This is a lesson that these 7 NBA players had to learn the hard way. Starting with Josh Giddey, when rumors stirred up that are going to stick with him for the rest of his career.
I mean, like, bro, he thought the girl was of age, bro, because she was at a place where, like, I think it was like 18 and up or something like that. So he didn't know how old the girl was.
Me and my girl, gotta head back to mine.
As rumors started to fly that all but confirmed Giddey's inappropriate relations with a girl that was 15 years old at the time the pictures and videos were taken, Josh Giddey's career and public reputation took an absolute freefall.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the biggest challenge I've ever gone through. You know, those for a number of reasons, obviously, and you know, I think mentally is the part that gets overlooked the most.
With a picture that says just
But like, obviously though, bro, you can look at her and tell her she's not of age. Let's keep it a buck, bro. You can like just look at her face, bro. She does not look like she's 18 or older, bro. So I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to speak too much on this whole situation. You know what I'm saying? But you can obviously see that she's not of age,
The
bro.
questions began arising as it became hard to deny that there was at least some sort of relationship here. And as sources coming directly from the girl's high school validated the concern for her age, the investigation was on. But not only from weirdos on the internet as this usually goes. The buzz became large enough that both the NBA and the law had to intervene. Josh Giddey was instantly the most hated man in the basketball world, getting roaring boos from tip-off to buzzer in every arena he went in, and at times even his own. Despite the flurry of evidence that for damn sure didn't help his cause in disproving the allegations, the lack of details on the story muddied the waters on the exact timeline of events. Given that the two reportedly met at an 18-plus bar, it was not possible to confirm or deny that Giddey knew the girl's age, and the lack of willingness to comply with the law essentially meant in the eyes of the NBA and the law, Giddey was innocent, due to the inability to prove him as guilty. But that same lack of evidence...
because honestly, bro, if you're in a 19-plus, you know what I'm saying, bar or some shit, you would think that everybody there would be of age, you know what I'm saying? So how the fuck does a 15-year-old somehow get into a bar like that? She had to have like a fake ID or something.
Saved him in the NBA's investigation, or at least from prolonging the investigations and possible legal trials, may have cost him the trial in the court of public opinion. It's no secret that Giddey's one of the most hated players in the league that will likely be mocked until he disappears from basketball for good. And judging by his play, that may be sooner than we initially expected. Despite a major jump from his rookie year to his sophomore seasons following the allegations being public, Giddey's production, to put it simply, is not what it used to be. What looked like a promising young, well-rounded point forward turned into what was statistically the least productive player in the NBA at a point last season. Last in true shooting percentage in the NBA, worst defender on the team, an abysmal plus-minus, and an absolutely terrible series against the Mavericks in the playoffs that led to the demise of the one-seeded Thunder's season.
You know, I can't wait to get back next season and show, you know, that I'm a different player and to never let what happened this series, you know, happen again.
With a plagued reputation that will likely never heal and live within the franchise while also being a pretty good candidate for the NBA's next draft list, the Thunder were lucky to rid his talents from the team. And landing a pretty decent player in Alex Caruso made this one of the worst trades I've ever seen, and the internet surely agrees. Wow. The future of Giddey's career is not looking as bright as it was. And the same can be said for Meyers Leonard. As a big guy who can shoot the ball, Meyers Leonard may have had the biggest cakewalk into NBA relevance possible. After 7 mediocre seasons with the Portland Trail Blazers, Leonard had finally seen the fruits of his labor paying off with a $20 million payday and a starting role on the Eastern Conference champion Miami Heat. Meyers was on his way out. He wasn't lighting the world on fire or anything, I would never say that, but as a multi-millionaire being able to blow it in one of the biggest party towns in the country, his job security was also looking pretty damn good as the rise of a three-point shooting center became more and more valuable. Not only did his production rise, but it also hit his major shortcoming, which was his notoriously low basketball IQ. Leonard was known to pull some of the most boneheaded plays you'll see on the court. But as a three-point shooter with a decent frame, he was good enough to soak up minutes in the NBA, which means it's also enough to become generationally wealthy, but the stupidity apparently didn't end on the floor. After a shoulder injury in 2021, this left Meyers with a surplus of time on his hands, where he chose to utilize his hobby to fill it while making some extra change on the side. Leonard got into the world of live streaming with a small yet notable viewer base of diehard Miami Heat fans most likely, who would be subject to a bombshell of a stream. And it wasn't just a Warzone win, as Leonard would use an anti-Semitic slur to express his anger at the game. Despite his excuse of not knowing what the word meant, that meant little to the organization, who clearly saw no future in the role player disposing of them
said a hard R
as they possibly could.
Felt like I had just destroyed my life and everything that I worked for, to be honest.
quickly going from a starting role on the Eastern Conference champions to injured and battling the struggles of the rehabilitation process to making a single mistake that resulted in a full-fledged cancellation. As the world seemed to voice their opinion on Myers, the cancel Myers hashtag would trend for days after this incident. And as quickly as they could, Leonard would be swept under the rug as just another body in the NBA's closet to seemingly never resurface. After 2 years removed from the instance, Myers Leonard would eventually land another opportunity to play NBA basketball with the Milwaukee Bucks. After 2 years of giving to Jewish communities and speaking at numerous events on the importance of your everyday actions, but even after doing all that he could to try and make his wrongs right, an actually pretty good performance with the Bucks with per 36 averages of 13.5 points and 11 boards on nearly 50-40-90 shooting splits, Myers Leonard would play what could very well be his final 9 games in the NBA, going unsigned for the 23-24 season. It's a bit hard to not feel bad for Leonard no matter how dumb his mistake was, as while you're rising the ranks in the league, just one single word that he didn't know the meaning of apparently costed him his career he was building. But it's a little harder to feel bad for Bill Laimbeer after his collapse from the NBA's brightest lights. Bill Laimbeer's career really was something to marvel at, as oddly one of the first stretch bigs in the league, which rarely gets talked about, a defensive anchor and a vocal leader on one of the best teams of all time, Laimbeer's legacy should be held in high regard. But in the words of former teammate Dennis Rodman, he was more than a thug, but that's what he'll be remembered for. The instigator of the dirtiest team in the most physical period of basketball never really outlived the dirty player reputation. As Isaiah Thomas gained recognition as one of the best point guards in history, Dennis Rodman built his own goofy but respectable legacy, and Joe Dumars really isn't held in the same vein as Laimbeer either. He's kind of in a league of his own as one of the era's most hated players, and he really deserved it. When it comes to over-the-top, put-you-on-your-ass fouls, Laimbeer wasn't hiding what he was out there to do. And whether you were a Pistons fan and you couldn't see enough of the guy, or you were anyone else and you couldn't wait for the demise of the Detroit Pistons, it is impossible to say that these guys weren't effective. 3 straight trips to the finals from '88 to 1990, with 2 banners to show for it, these guys did what they had to do to get to the top. But in reality, being the bullies of the league couldn't last forever. The end of the Bad Boys era was a conclusion that many could not wait to finally see.
That picture looks crazy. Bad Boys era. This picture looks crazy, gang. I had to go lie.
Many could not wait to finally see, with no more fitting ending than the strange disappearance of their poster boy center. The Pistons wore their hearts on their sleeves no matter where they went, and even in practice, these guys were still beating the living hell out of each other for the love of the game. And after a decade of putting up with Bill Laimbeer's antics day after day, they finally snapped. Shortly after breaking one of his ribs, Isaiah Thomas caught one of Laimbeer's elbows right in his soft spot. Stopping practice to freak out on his co-star, Laimbeer didn't break character for anyone, saying it's just a basketball play. After screaming out, "I don't need to take that shit," Isaiah Thomas would break his hand on Laimbeer's skull. Just 11 days after outscoring the prime Shaquille O'Neal, Laimbeer would retire from the game altogether, saying he no longer has the desire to compete, after his antics drove his own team leader to hate his guts. In a move that shocked the world, this seemed like a very fitting ending to a team that will never happen again if the NBA has anything to say about it, which they do a pretty damn good job of, because we sure as hell haven't seen another player like Josh Howard since his bombshell of an NBA exit. From beginning to end, Josh Howard's career was riddled in controversy, and I mean from the very damn beginning, before he even suited up for an NBA game. Going into the draft as projected lottery pick, he would see his draft stock fall off the face of the earth after deciding to be upfront with teams about his love for smoking little green at a time where this wasn't exactly accepted, especially for the world's top.
Really, bro?
But as a young athletic wing who can defend,
why would you even say some dumb shit like
bunches, that? Mark Cuban had no problem putting up with some skunky locker
rooms. At least he's being honest, but bro, come on.
And a few years into his career, this surely looked like the case. 3 years after being selected 29th overall, Josh Howard was an all-star, putting up 19-7 on the 67-15 Mavericks, who sat on top of the NBA. The NBA was really in the palm of his hands at 26 years old, as he continued to climb to 20-7 as Dirk's right-hand man in the 2008 season. This really looked like one of the NBA's brightest duos, set to compete with the best the NBA had to offer for the set future. But in the span of a week, it seemed like Josh Howard had become a man set to destroy himself. On top of his absolutely piss-poor play in the 2008 playoffs at 12 points a game on 29% shooting and 10% from deep, it seemed like Howard was set on staying in the headlines as much as possible. Howard started his media boom similar to his start in the NBA, going on a radio station to voice the status of not only his own smoking habits, but the tendencies of the league and his team as a whole.
Is all of this true that I am reading?
As far as like players in the league have that problem?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
And like, bro, like you hate to see like a very talented player like, you know what I'm saying, you ruin his career because he can't stop, you know what I'm saying, smoking weed and shit. You saw the same thing with Josh Flash Gordon in the NFL. Bro was a talented receiver, but nigga just could not stop abusing the NFL substance policy, bro. Like,
can't be
doing that, bro.
Like in the media world and the sports world.
Niggas is that addicted to smoking weed and doing all this other shit.
Also in this article, you were talking about that you don't feel that you have a problem, that you do smoke. You don't smoke during the season, but you do smoke in the off season. How true is that?
Yeah, it's true. But, you know, like I was saying to the guy, that has nothing to do with what I do as far as basketball. You know, when I go out there and perform. You know, that's how I feel about it.
Although no one really seems to give a shit now, this wasn't the case in 2008 and pointed a bad light on how Howard and his teammates were entering a tough playoff matchup after their playoff collapse the year prior. Mark Cuban, in a pretty mature fashion, was clearly not happy about the situation, but unwilling to publicly out his player and take the focus away from where it should be, stating that he would settle the issue internally. But as Josh Howard would make an even bigger slip-up, it became harder and harder to defend him. After a big Game 4 loss, Howard would pass out flyers to his birthday party taking place in between Game 4 and the elimination Game 5 while down 3-1. To the disdain of his teammates and coaches, Howard actually followed through with the party, then went out to post by far the worst plus-minus on the entire team. Maybe he wanted the offseason of partying and the lighting up to come a little quicker, and once the offseason came, he made yet another splash, getting arrested for speed racing, going 40 miles over the speed limit.
Okay, Rashee Rice.
While facing his third major media shit stain in the last few months, he didn't even give the Mavericks time to think it over before the absolute bombshell of a video that would completely tarnish his reputation.
What happened?
Spangled Banner going on right now. I don't even celebrate that shit. I'm black, goddamn Obama, all that shit.
Whether joking or not, and whether the comments may actually have aged better culturally than expected, Josh Howard was getting absolutely destroyed by the media after his comments that were labeled as unpatriotic.
Well, it can be a big deal, I mean, because you're seeing a trail, and this is not the type of trail that you want to leave as a professional athlete, where they become like trails of baggage that you have to carry with you along the way. And in the climate that America's in right now, to come off as being unpatriotic is not good on the back of all the things that's been going on with Josh Howard for the last 5 months.
Kevin, your take?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, and the really sad thing about it is that Josh Howard at one time had Dallas in the palm of his hand.
Forcing the Mavericks' hand, for better or for worse, Dallas had to rid themselves of the media magnet moving Howard to the Wizards, who would quickly move him to the Jazz, who would move him to the Wolves, and after a couple of injuries, boom bang boom, Howard was out of the NBA, never to be heard of again. Ever since his exit from the league, Howard has been on the right track, coaching the youth and advocating for staying clean from the distractions that taught him a very blunt lesson, as he's apparently grown as a person and society has shifted in a way that actually puts him in a better light than it did before. Howard seems to be mostly forgiven, and by many has actually felt very bad for. But the same could not be said for Miles Bridges, who made a mistake that was far less forgivable.
Didn't he get arrested for like domestic violence or some shit?
With awards, more money than he could spend, and his law partner creating the duo that looked like they were here to save Charlotte, there was way too much at stake for him to throw it all away. But in days' time, it seemed that the world was ready to throw away Miles Bridges for good. Ever since coming into the NBA, Bridges has been a pleasant surprise in a city that doesn't get to shine very often. Putting up a very modest 7.5 and 4 as a rookie, Bridges had room to grow in every facet of the game as a versatile and athletic defender who could shoot the ball and create himself a little bit. Really, the sky was the limit, and year after year it felt like he was on track to reaching it. The next year was a jump to 13-6, and as LaMelo Ball would land on the team the following season and took away some of the looks he was getting, he adapted his game to fit the needs of the team, rising from a 33 to a 40% three-point shooter on 4.5 a game, while stepping into that role as a primary defender every time he's on the floor. There was a ton of reasons to be high on this kid. As shown in OG Anunoby's $42 million deal, the NBA has extreme value in these ultra-versatile role players. As a glue guy, he can play in transition, spot up and shoot the 3-ball, playing screener roles as a roll man, and as his playmaking ball handling developed, could even force other bigs to guard him as a pick and roll ball handler. Pick your team's weak points, let Bridges fill it, and it was no longer your weak points. Bridges would see a very dramatic jump in the 2022 season, as even though he was just third in field goal attempts on the team, Bridges would lead his Hornets in scoring at over 20 a game, and also led his Hornets squad to an above 500 record for the first time since Kemba Walker carried them in 2016. Bridges and Ball would be no faces of the
Charlotte Hornets, Kemba Walker was
fun and
different, bro.
On the on-court playstyles meshing together pretty perfectly, and their off-the-court friendship and seemingly likable personalities making them one of the most likable young duos in the league. Bridges would even be the recipient of the Hornets' inaugural Rick Bonnell Award, an award to be given annually to a Hornets player that best represents himself in the franchise with professionalism and cooperations with his interactions with the media. This would quickly turn into a laughingstock, as shortly after the media would turn Bridges into the NBA's biggest villain. While being a restricted free agent and coming off a season in All-Star and Most Improved Player discussions, Bridges made the loudest media splash of his life going into the 2023 season, but this didn't have anything to do with basketball. June 29th, 2022, Miles Bridges would be arrested for allegedly injuring a woman during a dispute that went way too far. Bridges would turn himself in and be charged with a domestic violence felony. Soon after, the mother of his 2 children, Michelle Johnson, would post a picture of her condition after the alleged assault, and this turned the questions and shock of the allegations into an all-out hate mob. As more details released of the allegations, in which Bridges pled no contest to and received 3 years probation, the court of public opinion essentially ruled to rid themselves of Miles Bridges altogether. According to Johnson's hospital report, the assault consisted of strangulation, a brain concussion, closed fracture of a nasal bone, contusion of a rib,
strangulation is crazy,
neck
bro.
Muscle sprain, all taking place in front of their 2 children. While Bridges was still
in front of the kids,
the NBA had the freedom to really do as they pleased with Bridges' future, in which they concluded to a 30-game suspension, which most people agreed was a bit light, though in a weird twist of league rules, effectively became a 10-game. Bridges would sit out the 2022-2023 season, as his $7.5 million offer from the Hornets was not enough for his liking, and the Hornets were letting this legal drama wear off before silently inserting him back onto the roster. While the NBA would reduce his penalty to just 10 games for the 2023-2024 season, and just like that, for strangling and concussing the mother of his kids in front of them, Bridges was back on the NBA floor and playing at an all-time great level. Although playing on a limited $7.9 million contract, it was an underpayment for a player of his talent level, but after putting up 21-7, Bridges just landed himself a 3-year, $75 million deal to stay in Charlotte. Bridges is a bit different from the other players we've seen thus far, as so far into his PR reboot, it doesn't seem like his career is destroyed at all. In fact, Bridges seems to have rolled over a horrifyingly terrible crime like a speed bump back to new heights in his career. Although the NBA is attempting to be as silent as possible about the reinstatement of Bridges, the fans certainly have not forgotten the crimes committed.
And like, bro did fuck up, you know what I'm saying? But I'm lucky glad it didn't ruin his career, bro, because dude is a baller.
Just breaking his girlfriend's windshield with pool balls.
Like, you just gotta make better decisions, bro.
Although Bridges is a really good basketball player, the fans seem to be the only ones holding him accountable for not being a good person, trashing him for what he did across all of his social medias, and clowning on his celebratory return to the NBA, with responses stating he should be returning to prison instead. I guess in the world we live in, the crime does not always...
Oh, but they ain't saying that about Chris Brown, though.
Josh Primo seemed to learn as well. As a really talented player, it can really be boom or bust. In the case of Dante Exum or Michael Carter-Williams, their failures as players primarily came down to lack of development from their base skill set, which wasn't at NBA levels. But in the case of guys like DeJounte Murray, when these guys do blossom into the player they're capable of becoming, they can become do-it-all threats that any championship contender would throw huge dollars at. In landing on the San Antonio Spurs, who had just traded Murray after letting him blossom, Josh Primo was a very talented lottery pick who landed to a system that knew what they were doing with these kinds of talents. As most experts predicted Josh Primo to go in the late first round, the Spurs surprised the whole world, drafting Josh Primo 10th overall in the 2021 NBA draft. But if there's any roster that can be excused for taking a gamble, it's the San Antonio Spurs, because these guys don't miss too often. Along an athletic 6'6", 18-year-old was set to make a splash as the youngest player in the NBA. Although his success was not instant, Primo would show flashes
being an 18-year-old in the NBA is crazy.
Throughout the 2021-2022 season. And as the Spurs were in a heavy rebuild, they had no problem giving Primo more minutes to go out and make mistakes and learn from them. And as the season went on, there were certainly reasons to be excited about some of the improvements he was making, and the Spurs doubled and tripled down on their future with him. Moving Primo into the starting lineup at the end of the season and taking their team option to extend his contract to 3 years, Primo looked like a cornerstone of the Spurs rebuild, which made it so much more out of the blue when 2 weeks later, after Primo's extension, he would be cut from the Spurs just 4 games in the 2022-2023 season at just 19 years old. This was shocking to say the least, as this was completely uncharted waters. Woj even weighed into the significance of the situation, stating, Josh Primo was the youngest player in the 2021 NBA draft, when when selected 12th to the Spurs. His on-court development absolutely had the organization excited about his NBA future. Waiving Primo so abruptly without explanation is fairly unprecedented and jarring.
Why did they waive
statement
him?
Following the mysterious release stating he's receiving help for previous trauma, feeding into the demand from fans to know why the hell a teenage guard just picked in the lottery is now unemployed. And it wasn't too long until the world got their
focus on his
a
mental
day later,
health.
the reason for the sudden extreme actions would be released. Josh Primo was let go from the Spurs after allegations arose of Primo inappropriately exposing himself to numerous women, most notably the prosecuting party who was the team psychologist. After suing the team for not acting on the instance sooner, and Primo for exposing himself 9 times throughout the season.
9 times? Okay, bro, you're way too young to be doing shit like this, bro. Nobody should do this at all. But bro, you're 19 years old. Bro, what? You freak ass nigga? Bro.
22 season, this quickly became the strangest story in sports. Although the recalling of the psychologist was not a bulletproof account proven in civil court, the legal and NBA investigation found some truth to the allegations. As Josh Primo never seemed to formally deny that this indecent exposure happened, the league found that Primo engaged in inappropriate and offensive behavior by exposing himself to women. Primo maintains that his conduct was not intentional, and the league did not find evidence that he engaged in any sexual or other misconduct apart from those brief exposures. How he would have accidentally done something like this, I have no idea. And the exact story is still a bit in the air, as the San Antonio Spurs would settle with the psychologist to drop the case, presumably for a fat chunk of change. While Primo would not be tried in criminal court, this did not mean that Primo's career would not be significantly altered in the process. Many people were predicting that this would be the flat-out end of Josh Primo altogether, before his 20th birthday. And after nearly a calendar year since he was released from the Spurs, this looked like a real possibility. Primo would receive a low risk in terms of monetary compensation and possible high reward in terms of on-court development contract in return for media scrutiny from the Los Angeles Clippers on a 2-way deal in September 2023. And with his legal issues now sorted out, although leaving one of the most bizarre timelines in NBA history, Josh Primo was back out on the NBA floor for a very brief 2 games before being waived by the Clippers altogether. Never shooting over 40% from the field for a season, although 2 of the 3 were just a handful of games, it's hard to imagine that Primo sees a real return to the floor, given the reputation of his off-court issues far outweighing his reputation as a player, which definitely holds true for Latrell Sprewell. Sprewell's reputation as a menace is pretty well known, but unlike Primo, his NBA career actually turned out pretty prosperous. As a 4-time All-Star, Sprewell's long stretch in the NBA came to a crashing end, but likely not for the reason that you may think. Sprewell made an immediate impact on the Golden State Warriors, finished 11th in MVP voting in just his 2nd season in the NBA, while being selected for the All-Star team 3 out of his first 5 years. Latrell's run at Golden State would come to a very abrupt ending in an infamous violent outburst at practice after being criticized for not making crisp enough passes. Sprewell would then mouth off the coach PJ Carlesimo, telling him he wasn't in the mood for criticism, and demanding that the coach keeps his distance. Refusing to follow his temper-sensitive player's orders, Carlesimo would approach Sprewell. He would then threaten to kill him before grabbing him by the throat and dragging him backwards for upwards of 10 seconds before teammates were able to separate the two. After showering and reportedly blowing off some steam, it clearly didn't
crashing
work
out at
because
practice.
20 minutes later, Sprewell was back landing a right hand to the face of his head coach. And just like that, Sprewell had the longest suspension in NBA history up to that point. This wouldn't be the last controversial moment in Sprewell's career. And actually, this wasn't even really the first. Sprewell started his career about as big of a menace as he finished it, fighting Byron Houston, who was 50 pounds heavier than Sprewell and had what many teammates described as a Mike Tyson-like demeanor and physique.
Bro is playing the wrong sport, bro. Go over there to boxing or like UFC or some shit, bro, because obviously the NBA is not for you,
rookie
man.
season in the NBA. It didn't
Nigga
end
trying to
there,
be
as
like
2 years
Draymond.
later, after a fight with teammate Jerome Kersey, Sprewell returned to practice armed with a 2x4
Draymond?
and threatened to return with a gun. Sprewell was clearly a hot-headed menace who burned a lot of bridges, so it
I ain't gonna lie, bro. Draymond ain't this much of a crash out, bro. Draymond just be attacking niggas on the court and shit. This motherfucker trying to end people, yo. Like, bro.
Ended in the most stupid fashion imaginable. After strangling his coach, although making a single additional All-Star appearance, he never returned as the star of any team he was on, and really just filled the role of a quality starter in the NBA for the remainder of his career. Despite being a hard-nosed veteran in his final days in the Minnesota Timberwolves, it should be a surprise that after putting up near 13 a game in his last year, he never landed a contract. Well, if he wasn't the biggest locker room cancer in the league. The reality of the situation is that Latrell did have offensive offers to play in the NBA for multiple years to come, but in Sprewell fashion, he bit the hand that fed him, ironically. Minnesota would offer the 34-year-old veteran an offer of 3 years, $21 million, in which Sprewell harshly denied, stating that he has a family to feed. As other offers started rolling in, Sprewell demanded his agent denied all of them in expectations of landing a higher offer from a contender mid-season, looking to push themselves over the top. And to nobody's surprise except his own, those offers would not come, and Sprewell would never play in the NBA again. This wasn't even close to the end of his problems, as shortly after, Sprewell would be arrested for strangling a woman on his yacht.
Oh my gosh, bro. This nigga's
would end up
weird.
in a $200 million lawsuit with the mother of 3 of his 9 kids, would end up losing his house in foreclosure while owing $3 million to the IRS.
Gosh.
$21 million would have helped a little bit.
Nah,
the value
for real,
of your reputation
bro.
at the highest level of professional sports is truly priceless. What's more interesting is how the perspective on an individual's action is weighed given the time that they played. Check out this video here where we dive into some of the darkest days that the NBA has ever seen, and as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you boys in the next one.
Wow, man, that shit was crazy. Hey, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. You know what I'm saying? Y'all let me know what other NBA videos y'all want me to react to. Without further ado, I'm out. Yeah.